a shift left strategy simply look at getting tickets fixed by end users themselves rather than calling IT? No. Now, I'm guessing you might be familiar with the term shift left, but if you're not, today we're going to be looking at what that means, the entire shift left scale, and how you can do more than simply look at self-serve options. I'm Gareth at SIOAAA, and this is the shift left scale. When it comes to resolving incidents, the key driver is always getting service restored as quickly as possible and in line with service level agreements, and rightly so. An incident of any priority translates into somebody needing to do something, and because of an IT fault, they can't. And in most, if not all IT departments, incident tickets typically constitute the biggest bulk of work. Therefore, any activity concentrated on incident management is going to take a significant amount of time, money, effort to correct those things that aren't working as they should. But how you opt, by design or not, to resolve those incident tickets can result in your IT function spending more time, more effort, more money than is necessary. If that is the case, that can go against you being able to meet those targets, but more importantly, it can mean that end users are not going to be able to do what they need to do, perhaps longer than is necessary. And this is where the shift left scale can really add some value to your users and teams. So let's start by looking at how incidents get resolved in the first place. Now, most IT departments have an entry point into their support services, and you don't need me to tell you that this is ordinarily the service desk, who own or should own the end-to-end process of a user reporting an issue all the way through to that incident being resolved and the user confirming that the episode is closed. Now, a lot of IT departments measure their desks on first contact fix rate, and for clarity that means the whole incident process is started and concluded, whilst the user is on the phone having initially reported the issue. Another popular measure is the fixed at first line rate, meaning that the incident ticket has not left the desk or been reassigned to other support groups in order for that service restoration to be achieved. Fixed at first contact tickets can be counted as part of the overall fixed at first line measure, but not the other way around. So, by way of example, let's look at a fairly straightforward ticket, a password reset. Now, actually, while I think about it, I know this is a contentious point which I'm going to sidestep for the minute. A lot of IT departments classify password resets as incidents, and a lot handle them as service requests. If you have a spare 3 months, do a Google search for whether a password reset should be an incident or should it be a service request, and read all the opinions on which one ITIL supports the best. Seriously. In fact, I'll set myself a challenge of doing a video that puts this whole subject to bed in the coming weeks. Anyway, back to the example. For argument's sake, let's say your IT department classifies password resets as incidents, and the agreed process for a password reset is for the user to call the desk. If the user manages to come off the phone, having reported the issue, now again able to access their account, that would be counted as a first time fix. If the user comes off the phone still not being able to access their account, and a short while later someone from the desk calls them back to confirm this should now be working, and indeed it is, fixed at first line. Nice and easy. But important, they are different measures, so don't confuse the two, and that can be important when we look at the shift left scale. Now, if the service desk cannot fix an issue, it's commonplace for that incident ticket to be passed to the next level of support. And good incident management practices will ensure that the reassignment to the next level of support is firstly identified as being necessary as quickly as possible, and then secondly, the ticket is passed to the right support group. Now, there's a definite art in ensuring your triage process strikes the right balance of capturing, pulling out and validating all the necessary information to allow this to happen reliably and consistently without keeping your end users on the phone for 45 minutes to allow that to happen. Not finding that balance, as I'm sure you've experienced, is going to lead to incorrect ticket assignments, tickets bouncing around the IT department and maybe into third parties before its correct destination is found. Goes without saying, when that happens, it's burning more IT time and effort, and crucially means that the user is still experiencing the impact that the incident has caused. So good triage practices, such as using standardized triage templates, are commonplace to avoid this situation from occurring. Now, depending on the size and shape of your IT function, there may be multiple levels of IT support past the desk, and colloquially these can be referred to as things like second line, third line support. Call them what you will, but the process is pretty much the same. If one level of support have exhausted their ability to fix the incident, be that based on maybe the level of access they have, the skills, knowledge, resources available to them, the incident, a defined milestone set against the service level, moves to the next level of support. And of course that's entirely appropriate. There are those incidents that absolutely need that elevated and more concentrated or specific level of expertise. And that's why you have those levels of IT support in place for sure. For example, if the incident needs specific hands-on touch remediation, it's essential that that's done by the most appropriate, skilled individual with the right level of access than just any old Tom, Dick and Harry in the IT department. But you'll know as well as I do that more specific, concentrated expertise comes at a premium that are perhaps not as readily available as lower levels of support. For example, in most IT functions, there are likely to be less third-line Oracle DBAs than there are first-line service desk analysts. Given the next level of support resources are fewer in numbers and are most likely going to cost more to consume than earlier levels of support, there are definite cost, time and effort implications in more tickets finding their way to these teams than being dealt with further up the chain. And this is when the importance of that fixed at first line metric can really help. If the fixed at first line figure is low, this means that more incidents are having to be fixed by your more expensive finite resource at deeper or higher levels of support. This is not only going to increase your cost of support, it's going to add time to the process and therefore potentially impact your customers longer than if the incident was dealt with at first line. And this is where our shift left scale comes into play. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar with the term shift left, but if you're not, imagine those levels of support mapped out on an axis. With first line on the left-hand side and the last level of support on the right-hand side. Dependent on, of course, on the size and scale of your IT function, which can include and extend to those of your partners and suppliers, there may be many more hops from the right to the left. And shifting left is the process by which we shift left the incident resolution taking place. So, for example, let's say there are 4 levels of support. We know innately that tickets that are resolved at fourth line take longer, cost more, and require more effort than those that are fixed at first line. For a start, the incident tickets that are resolved at fourth line firstly have to navigate those earlier layers of support before they get to where they need to go, meaning more time, more effort, more cost. So, shifting left aims to look at those tickets that are fixed at fourth line, understanding why it is that those tickets have to be fixed at that level, and what it would take to get those tickets resolved at the previous level of support, or ideally even earlier. Now, that can be down to a multitude of things, as we mentioned. Perhaps the fourth line teams have a specific level of access that allows them to resolve those incidents that maybe wouldn't be appropriate to give lower levels of support. Perhaps it's down to specific knowledge or expertise. Now, whatever the reason, I think it's really important to ask the questions why and how, and to assess continually what is being fixed by which level, and understand where there are opportunities through greater knowledge sharing, coaching, training to shift certain tickets left. Now, a lot of the time in my experience, those advanced levels of support are not there solely to work on incident tickets. For example, given their skills and experience, they may be involved in more strategic IT activity. And well, frankly, incident work gets in the way from them being able to focus on and deliver maybe project, service improvement or transformational change activity. Now, again, there can be resistance to this shift left work taking place. You might hear comments such as, well, I don't trust that they'll do it right. It'll only end up coming back to me to do properly. What am I going to do if I'm not doing this work? Therefore, as an IT leader, I think it's important to bake in this shift left continual service improvement mentality as part of your team's objectives and incentives. In particular, having a neatly defined way to measure that tickets are being fixed at advanced levels of support are gradually reducing where appropriate. Now, first and foremost, I think it's imperative to invest time as part of your incident management process to ensure the information presented in the ticket is as rich as it possibly can be. And in this scenario, I'm talking specifically about resolution details. Now, all ITSM platforms out of the box most likely require the IT technician to record what activity they carried out to fix the incident. I bet, like me though, you will have seen many times the level of detail in that field be no more, no less than issue fixed. Now, that level of information is pretty much useless to everybody. Whilst no doubt true and the issue is fixed, what can you do with that info? Nothing, other than confirm that the issue is fixed. I advise you to be fairly stringent on ensuring any ticket being marked as resolved contains sufficient detail to allow other groups to understand what was done to actually fix the incident. I'd then start by using this information to understand what it would take to get that ticket fixed at third line or second line rather than fourth line. My advice, if you have internal operational reviews, to spend time focusing on those tickets that the support groups had to hand off to the next level of support to understand what it would take for them to fix it. And in reverse, that they have been handed, the tickets that they've been handed by the previous level of support, understand what they could do to get those shifted left. Lots of operational reviews I've been party to have focused on the negative aspects of what has happened, in the previous reporting period. Why did this ticket fail its SLA? Why wasn't X, Y, and Z done? Of course, those things have some importance, but I think it's equally, if not more important, to understand what is the art of the possible in doing things differently to drive service improvement. And reviewing that ticket data to look at what could I bring in left or what could I shift left is absolutely excellent to do. And looking for those opportunities to shift left can benefit your teams, but of course, the overall delivery of service to your users. Now, there's another concept as well, shifting right, which can have its own place in making your process more efficient, but I'd argue not in isolation or in place of shifting left. For example, let's say the service desk identify for a particular service in a particular scenario, the ticket has to get to fourth line in order to get fixed. In that scenario, rather than going via the second and third line team to get to the fourth line team, it can be appropriate to skip those groups and go directly to where the incident needs to be fixed. However, tread with caution. I'd advise, if you're doing this, the service desk need to be very, very, very clear on the parameters of the incident, the very specific symptoms and conditions when it should absolutely go to the fourth line experts, for example, instead of bypassing the other levels of support. What you can't afford is for tickets that could be fixed at second or third line being mistriaged with limited information and skipping incorrectly all the way to the end. Creating the advanced levels of support more work than is absolutely necessary. Again, it's worth paying close attention to your incident data and only in consultation with that fourth line team, for example, gaining agreement that in these scenarios, with these conditions met, it's appropriate and right to skip straight to them. In this scenario, I think it's doubly important for other shift left candidates to be identified as well, so doing two things in harmony. After all, in doing this, you've already saved the second and third line teams some time, so in theory they should have more capacity to dedicate to dragging other incidents left. Okay, so if you've worked in and around incident management for any period of time, then this doesn't probably sound very revolutionary, but the shift left scale doesn't stop there. So back to our axis. Now, I described the shift left scale as having the advanced levels of support on the right hand side and the first line teams on the left. This is true, but for me only describes the right hand side of the scale. There are further opportunities to shift left on our imaginary scale. Now, again, I know what you're thinking, and you're maybe sat there saying to yourself, okay, he's going to start talking about self-service. And well, yes, I am. But even that is not the far left-hand side of the scale. So, let's talk about self-service to begin with. As I touched on in my actually implementing AI video recently, self-service options, be that to fix particular issues or access helpful knowledge, is now very much the way of the world. Culturally, a lot of users almost expect to be able to do certain things themselves without the need to call up someone from IT. And we all do this in our non-work lives on a day-to-day basis. Be that logging onto your internet banking to transfer funds from one account to another that in days gone by would have required you to visit a branch, or to ordering a pizza, for example, from Just Eat that again previously would have required you to make a phone call to your local pizza joint. Companies, and not just IT departments, have made use of these sorts of facilities, have done two things really. Well, they've used the technology available to them to meet their needs, the needs of their users. And secondly, they've reduced their operating costs in delivering those services to customers. Now, as I mentioned in my previous video, this can be taken too far, where the need to operationally rationalise trumps the end user experience. And self-service features need to be actions that any user can do safely. Self-serve does not equate to giving all of your users local admin rights to allow them to do whatever in order to fix whatever. Whilst there may be a scenario that giving them such access would be beneficial, it's unlikely to be very safe for them to do so. And in fact, it's probably likely to cause more incidents as they invariably break stuff with that heightened level of access. So where do you start in identifying those tickets that could benefit from a self-service option? My first suggestion is to take a look at your incident data and understand which tickets currently being fixed at first line or at first contact, and look at which of those tickets you get the most of. What type, what is the symptom? Ask yourself the question, what would it take to get the users to do this themselves rather than making a call? But importantly, don't do this in isolation. To make that happen, there may be work required outside of the remit and capability of the first line team to do this. Any self-service option, if it's going to create value, is going to have its own mini utility and warranty. So think carefully about how you industrialise these self-serve options. It's no good providing an option to end users that delivers the right outcome, but relies on users being able to carry out complex IT activity. Think of your user experience. Secondly, knowledge. So lots of IT teams get asked questions directly about how to do something, or indirectly, this is broken, when in reality it's not broken, it just needs advice and guidance. Again, we are in the Google generation, and if I have a question at home, I'm more likely to jump onto Google to understand why my Virgin Media router isn't working as expected, rather than call their service desk. And if I were to do that, there'd be literally tons of comments on many message boards, alongside official bona fide advice and guidance published by Virgin Media themselves. Now, every IT organisation I've ever worked in has a knowledge function, but they all suffer from having out-of-date information, struggling to get that information updated and maintained, and of course where to store it. I've found some success in this in the past by doing just a couple of really simple things. Firstly, make your knowledge repository somewhere quick and easy to find, like having a link to it from the front page of the intranet, or if you have such a thing, the portal where your users go to log tickets. And promote the use of knowledge over the need to call the service desk. Take a look at a lot of the service companies' websites and their self-serve options. Track a package, get a quote, frequently asked questions are featured more prominently, more so than the contact us section of their website. They've not removed that, but it drives the user towards serving themselves first rather than placing a call. Also, make sure there is a direct correlation between what users are calling the desk about with which articles are revised, published, maintained and promoted. There's absolutely no point in creating a shed load of knowledge, which again takes time and effort to do, for an issue that maybe generates 2 calls a year. Make sure your knowledge content is pertinent to what your users are asking you about. Lastly, when it comes to knowledge, my advice, utilise what's already out there. I work for a company that were going through a rollout of a new Microsoft Office version, and their knowledge team was spending a huge amount of time creating knowledge articles about the new features, how to do certain things, but in the company's house style with all its branding and what have you. Waste of time. Microsoft in that example themselves publish significant amounts of end user content, and given that your users are unlikely to be doing anything bleeding edge with their new Office suite, somebody somewhere in the world has probably already overcome the challenge and probably blogged about it or put it on a website. So rather than waste time researching and recreating content that already exists, spend time finding that content, validating it, and point your users to that. I made this suggestion at the company I work for and got a bit of resistance, I will say. Yeah, but our users need and like to have this content in our own style. Do they? Do they really? And are the powers that be accepting and willing to pay for the time it takes for us to make that happen? Come on. Okay, so that's self-service. But as mentioned, there are further areas to explore left of that option. So what are they? Okay, so if you do a quick search on Google for incident management automation, you'll quickly find resources and tools about automating the incident management process itself to automatically detecting incidents, response to those, assessment, assignment of those tickets to the right assignment group. All very worthwhile and very much aligned really to what I was saying earlier about shifting right. Finding the thing and getting the thing to the right place quicker, which in doing so should speed up the process and therefore speed up the resolution, in theory. From a shift left scale perspective though, this is not that. What we're talking about here is using automation to resolve the incidents as they occur. So it's not needing the user to do something or the IT department to do something in order to restore service, so almost self-healing. So whilst just stopping short of preventing the thing from happening at all, something is still happening behind the scenes automatically to restore service. Now, I remember debating this point with someone in the past, and their view was that automated recovery options extended to utilising failover or resiliency within your service. For example, your office might have two divergent network connections, the primary and the secondary link. The primary link fails and automatically users are switched over to the secondary. Now, from a user experience perspective, yes, they may not even notice the blip, but in my opinion, there is still an incident that needs somebody to do something about in that scenario. If the primary circuit is dead, well, somebody needs to do something to fix it, right? So whilst similar in tone and having resilient services is naturally good for your users, I think it's slightly different. Part of the shift left scale is benefiting the user experience, but also crucially driving IT to be more efficient and reducing mean time to resolve. In this scenario, there's still an incident that is going to take IT's time and effort to resolve, but the impact is less. Many incidents we get day to day are not new. They are repeats of issues that other users have had and have reported previously. And in some cases, there can often be an air of predictability when these things are going to occur, be that linked to a specific time period or based on certain other things happening and certain events, with a capital E, being seen. One example I've seen, probably not very elegant in today's terms, but one that hopefully highlights the point. Now, we found a particular department would experience issues with one of their key line of business applications on a fairly regular basis. Reviewing the incident tickets, we could tell that this tended to be every week or so and seemed to occur off the back of a couple of very specific events being captured. The fix, workaround applied, was to reboot the server, after which the incidents disappeared, only to then sort of start reoccurring 8 or 9 days later. The reboot happened out of hours and the customer was happy that this action was taken as it provided the sort of necessary relief and perceived service stability. However, this still needed IT to do this, of course. Somebody had to be out of bed in the middle of the night to reboot that server. Being realistic, the size of the department impacted, the role they did, the overall criticality of this service to the business meant getting to root cause and fixing that was low down on the priority list. And, customer was understanding of this as well. Therefore, we opted to script this reboot to take place out of hours once that event had been captured. If no event, no reboot. Now, I'll quickly get out of my technical depth if I try and describe more scenarios where this sort of approach could be applied, but my message is hopefully fairly clear. Involve your technical teams, your development teams, whatever you call them, in your analysis of incident tickets, particularly when it comes to proposing or progressing problem records, and explore options to automate parts of the service restoration steps, where their expertise leads. Easy, right? Now, we've got to a place where the incidents are still occurring, but through automation, they may be going completely unnoticed from an end user experience point of view. That said, it's still taking effort to get them to that point and may still be requiring ongoing effort to maintain that automation solution. But what if we could prevent those incidents from occurring in the first place? Yes, by and large, we're talking about incident management, but for me, problem management sits at the very far end of the shift left scale. The scale's reason for being is to do three things: reduce the cost of the incident, reduce the time the user is impacted, reduce the effort in establishing service restoration. What better way to do that than to prevent the incidents from occurring in the first place? I know it's much easier said than done, and I won't go through the basics of why we have problem management. But what I think this scale neatly illustrates is the interdependencies and collaboration that should exist between your ITIL processes. Whilst yes, they are their own processes in their own right, they need to be neatly integrated with one another and to share some common objectives. A lot of organisations focus their problem management activity to get to root cause off the back of major incidents and major incidents alone. Yes, majors are or can be widely disruptive, and it makes sense to understand why those things have happened. But in the times I've engaged with end users about their experience of IT, they rarely call out the P1 that we had a couple of weeks ago as being the thing that pisses them off the most. It's the thing they have to call up about every other day and sit on the phone to the desk about for 5 minutes that's going to really grind their gears. Now, if your incident management process is catching all this useful ticketing info, yet no one is reviewing it from an incident management or a problem management perspective, then you're wasting valuable time and resources. The option isn't, just let's stop recording that ticket data. No, the best option is to do something with that information that makes a positive difference. Again, when I've been the recipient of problem management services, there have been occasions where problem management is focused solely on getting to and fixing root cause of incidents. And rightly so. However, we also know that achieving that utopia in itself can prove timely and costly. Therefore, the shift left scale, I feel, addresses that second part of the objective statement for problem management, which maybe gets overlooked in the quest to get to root cause, and that is to minimise the impact of incidents that cannot be prevented. If those incidents cannot be prevented, now or never, what's the best way to get those dealt with from a cheaper, faster, better perspective? Therefore, problem management and incident management need to work together to understand which tickets can be shifted left, ideally all the way up the scale. Final thought, shifting left by 1 degree is certainly a good step, but don't consider it as job done. If you're moving incident resolution from third line to second line, yes, that is going to benefit the service delivered to your users, but that doesn't mean you should down tools from a problem management perspective to understand how to prevent or better mitigate the impact of these incidents occurring. Adopting and using the shift left scale is an ongoing exercise in the spirit of continual service improvement and takes a lot of people to contribute, be that from your problem team, the incident team, desk, or the varying levels of support teams that we discussed. Now, I've found gamifying this process to a degree across your department can add some good focus and fun behind encouraging your team to shift left, measuring which teams have been able to shift left the most, and scoring more points for the more hops achieved. Maybe try that and give that a go within your department. So that's the shift left scale. Let me know in the comments what successes or challenges you've had when it comes to addressing some of the points covered today. And I'll look forward to seeing you next time at SIOAOA. Take it easy.